Anthem, the poor man's Warframe, which is very ironic considering that Warframe is the free one and Anthem was the paid one. Anthem returned to the limelight after years of irrelevancy from gaming discourse with the announcement of its closure on the 3rd of July. In totally unrelated news, the Stop Killing Games petition reached its goal a few days prior. Something tells me that EA got flashbacks after its last run-in with EU lawmakers.
Surprise mechanics.
EA, challenge everything. No, not that. Now, the response to this announcement has been overwhelmingly, wait, it's still alive? Even Polygon was like, EA's shutting down Anthem's servers, which were still up. In retrospect, it would be a bit weird to shut down servers that were already down, but that's just how absent this game has been. It was released just over 6 years ago, and has received no update ever since EA decided to cancel plans to improve it 4 years ago. It's frankly a miracle it has clung to life. But you see, I knew it's been alive all this time, and that's because Anthem is a game most pervasive. I knew, somewhere down the line, that I'd want to play Anthem. Yes, I was aware of its troubles at launch and that the game is by all means dogshit, but there is a certain allure in experiencing a piece of gaming history, like immortalizing it by getting its trophies or achievements. You'd be experiencing a shit piece of history, but a piece of history all the same. Now, if you wanted to do the same, well sister, you might run into a bit of a problem. With the announcement of its closure, EA also delisted it from stores, which is stupid. I know they wanted to cover their bases, but they could have at least have a last chance sale, because I'm sure there is a group of people that would want to experience it for cheap before it gets shut down, present company included. This is a practice that has seen increased use, and I sure hope it stops. Anyway, this is the point where I found out I never bought it. I remember seeing it for about €5 in stores, but apparently I didn't actually purchase it. Oh well, a bit of a blunder, but I was not out of options. Anthem would still be available through EA Play until mid-August according to this FAQ. In the same FAQ, they also clarify that closing Anthem has not resulted in any layoffs, and if you have to clarify that, you might be the problem. Anyway, the EA Play subscription was on sale for €0.99. Well now, that seems to be a pretty good deal, right? Nope, just about as wrong as saying tariffs will help us, and he will release those files. Anthem was nowhere to be found in my store, at which point I contacted EA support. They said the problem was with Sony and how delisting works on their platform and their regions, which honestly makes a lot of sense to me. The PlayStation storefront is shockingly primitive. So I got in contact with Sony support, and it's actually EA's fault because they control how our store lists items. What? Nonsense, but you can tell both support staff were gonna blame each other on repeat, so I was on my own there. In the end, I gotta hand it to both Sony and EA. Somehow they managed to disappoint me on a €1 purchase. That has to be a new low.
I don't set the bar.
I fucking drop it. I used EA Play instead to platinum Need for Speed Rivals, since its online functionality will also be shutting down. And that's one of the straightest things I've done in recent memory. It's a game complete with deadpan voice acting.
We are the enemy of freedom. I will run. We are the shadow you can't I will share. Never stop. We will hunt you. You will never catch me. Will not stop. You will make me weary.
And the music with motivational lyrics such as, I know I'm never gonna make it anyway. I think I'm gonna make it anyway.
Wow.
At this point, my last resort was getting a physical copy of Anthem on PS4 and playing it that way. Fortunately, getting a second-hand copy was pretty cheap, so I got Oh, it's right here. So I pop in the disc in the PS4 and... oh, for fuck's sake. Okay, so somehow the disk reading unit of my PS4 was damaged. I tried opening it up, but I didn't have the right tools, so I was concerned that I might be out of options. I mean, short of buying an overpriced disk drive. By chance, however, I did check the store, and Anthem was there, so I got it and then downloaded it on my PS5. I don't know if EA's subscription made Anthem available only through the PS4 store, which would be very stupid, or if me escalating the issue with support led to a fix, but I am not self-absorbed enough to allege that I am the reason it was fixed. Actually, no, you know what? Fuck that. If grifters can say they are responsible for massive games failing, then so can I say that my efforts are what made Anthem available to the people. Yes, clap for me and subscribe now. So, what is Anthem, in case you don't know? Well, we can take a look at the story of the three little piggies for that. The first piggy created Warframe, a live service game that has garnered a strong player base through constant engaging updates and a consistent commitment to not incorporate horrible gaming industry practices. It's been going strong for 12 years, and that's saying something. Then, the second piggy created the first Descendant, but because he was greedy and lazy, he just copy and pasted Warframe and put a lot of awful microtransactions, but, crucially, made characters with big boobs, so it's fine. And the last piggy made Anthem, a much worse copy of Warframe, fully priced with microtransactions and no Gunnar material. In short, it was doomed from the start. Jokes aside, it was very clear what EA wanted Anthem to be. They wanted to make bank as a Warframe competitor, while having no idea what Warframe is or why it became a darling in the eyes of its players. This was exemplified in detail in Anthem's troubled development, which you can look up yourself. It's a fascinating read, and its gameplay, which we'll be getting into now. Anthem, I think, has the most boring introduction I have ever experienced. Not that it doesn't introduce you to its mechanics, it does, but as an onboarding experience in the world of Anthem, it's terminally uninteresting. You are a new Javelin pilot, brought to the most dangerous place in the world, which is already quite idiotic. Everything goes wrong because predictable writing is predictable, and in the end most freelancers are dead, and as a group they fade into obscurity. Now, there is actually something very noteworthy here, something very smart. Frankly, the only smart thing in this game. This is a very apt allegory for working as a studio under EA. Just think about it, just think about it. You start out as a studio loved by many, you're mismanaged the fuck and back by your publisher and fail massively, then your studio gets shut down. EA, if it's in the game, it's in the game. What's not in the game? Your studio, you're now fired, goodbye. Now, let none of this distract you from the fact that Anthem does precious little to introduce its world to you. I know that the idea of immersion is very subjective. It can be a very hard concept to sell considering that what you do is sit in front of a screen, but let's all come to an agreement that to get engaged with a game, you need to establish some sort of connection between the player and the world. Anthem doesn't do that because it tells you nothing about its world. It doesn't give you a reason to care, essentially. This is a massive mistake the game never recovers from. It can't, because it never bothers correcting that after the fact. This sets up a strong sense of indifference early on, and that's exactly the one thing you don't want as a player response. Indifference as a response to game design is what non-AI women are to grifting gooners. The worst. God, this game is so woke you might just as well call it and they them. Now, after the Heart of Rage kerfuffle, we get a bit of a time skip, as well as the second part of the game's tutorial. We're guided by a new Cypher companion, Owen, who, as we'll find out, is a narrative device disguised as a twink. This is the bit that tells you the structure of the game's missions, and I have to give them genuine credit over using foreshadowing in a very unique way. For those of you who don't know, foreshadowing is a narrative device that hints perfectly at just how repetitive the game is. In a span of less than 5 minutes, the game repeats one of the few objectives it has, which is collecting the shiny orb things. And let's actually go through the limited objectives Anthem has, shall we? You have the orb thing, returning pieces of a relic to restore it, defending an area, finding several interactables or destroying them, and just flat out killing everyone. Though putting the last one separately is quite generous because the game has you kill enemies at the end of each objective anyway. You could also add puzzles to the list, but considering their quality and creativity, it feels like such an act of charity it might just as well be tax deductible. Whichever way, unless I have forgotten some niche objective, this list is shamelessly small. And I say shamelessly because there's no way someone could ever look at it and think that it could ever sustain interest in a live service model. The mission structure is also quite rigid. It's always go somewhere, do one of those objectives, go to another place, do another one of those objectives, and then do it one more time. There is some variation when it comes to content like the main story, but it's too minor to be noteworthy in any way, and usually still involves the same repetitive and limited objectives. You genuinely have to turn your brain off because at some point you just reach the point of parody. Like, you hit that out-of-body moment where you're watching yourself play and think, wow, this is exactly what non-gamers imagine gaming is like. This mediocrity also infects the rest of the gameplay experience through a fascinating design technique called bringing nothing new to the table. Anthem is a third-person looter-shooter to a fault. The most unique thing about it is its flight mechanic, to which I will say there is a neatness in how it interacts with the environment because you have to make sure your javelin doesn't overheat. It's admittedly quite okay, but I do think that we need to deconstruct this mechanic at its core, because why make it overheat? Think about it, if there's one unique thing your game does, you'd want to lean into that, not limit it. And yet, there are so many additive things that are there to prevent that, from certain enemy attacks to just flat out no flight zones. Hell, I've even come across situations where you had to retrieve those flying orbs, and there's this thing that makes your javelin overheat right on top of the return point. Why would you do that? What is the point of delaying my flight? Cause I'm gonna tell you something shocking. When you remove the ability to fly, Anthem is just a regular ass third-person shooter, of which there are hundreds. And I do realize that I'm kind of overselling the idea of flight in Anthem. That is really not my intent. Flying is fine at most, but it's like a neat cog in a machine that is barely hanging on, or a stunning pair of high heels with an unremarkable bodysuit. The shoes don't make the outfit, they complement it. And because Anthem's flight mechanic is complemented by the gaming equivalent of Go Girl Give Us Nothing, it doesn't end up doing much. And also, I would be remiss not to mention that Warframe did flight in an open world a few years before, though in retrospect I would add that it's not as great to control as I remember it. The weapons are bland and lack variety. There's like a few weapon types, with each having 3 subcategories where the only difference is stuff like rate of fire or magazine size. They're very standard for the genre, and that's a bit odd, isn't it? You have this futuristic sci-fi setting, and the best you can do is a machine gun that glitches out and shoots while it reloads? As a person who barely plays shooters, to put it straightly, that shit's weak. And look, you can say that Warframe also had its fair share of standard weaponry, and had the opportunity to implement more interesting stuff only as the years went on, or that its melee system was basic in its early days. And I should say, this is me playing devil's advocate. In no way do I think this is an apt comparison, but one of the massive differences between these games is that Warframe is not a looter shooter. It's shooter, but it's not looter, and that's kind of important. In Warframe, you actually have to craft your weapons and warframes with the resources you collect, and that's essential. When you have to put that sort of effort into making something, you do happen to establish somewhat of a connection with them. And sure, they eventually may be outclassed by other stuff, but it doesn't mean they won't be viable because the mod system can help you bring any weapon into high-level escapades. What I'm trying to say is that you don't have to let go of a weapon you're attached to, or like using. These things don't happen in a looter shooter, and I want to be fully transparent here. This sort of system never managed to catch my interest to begin with, so this is not only about Anthem, it's also applicable to games like The First Descendant, etc. What a looter shooter system is to me is an environment where the weapons you get don't really matter. You might find a good weapon, even one you enjoy using, but eventually you will have to let it go because of, say, increased difficulty or higher levels. You are basically playing as a reverse Leonardo DiCaprio. Whatever small figment of an attachment you may have for a weapon will be thrown out sooner or later, and when the endgame comes around, it's bound to be an RNG fest where you have to hope you get a good weapon, and then an additional RNG layer on top because you also wanted to have good passives. It can become frustrating very fast, and when you add repetitive to the mix, you get a recipe for disaster. Not to mention how your inventory becomes bloated and have to spend minutes every so often deleting stuff because you're hitting some upper limit. Anthem in particular is annoying at this because weapons and gears are separated per categories. You have to go to each corresponding menu, delete stuff you don't use, then go to the next, and so on and so forth. It's honestly quite shocking how annoying this system is made to be. These problems also extend to the javelins themselves, not just through the passive gears, but also active abilities, because they are items with particular stats and levels and different functionalities too. And let's talk about these javelins for a moment, because they are pretty important to Anthem's gameplay. Anthem has 4 javelins. When you reach a certain level, you can choose a new one to unlock. And again, we have this issue of not doing something special to unlock them. they're just things you get. But also, can we talk about these levels for a moment, because I think I might have some tea. The max level is 30, and based on how you unlock javelins, I'm getting the feeling that BioWare did not plan to release new ones unless they would also increase the level cap, which would put you in a very weird position where old accounts would have to grind a lot more for a new javelin, while new ones wouldn't, because later levels obviously need more EXP. But all of this, how I perceive it, hints to them being unwilling to add new javelins, and opting instead to keep developing existing ones with new gears and abilities. I mean, if you look at their roadmaps and other promotional material, not even once do they mention a new javelin. Even their blog posts about their plans of improving Anthem, the plans EA would cancel, holy shit, just 3 months later, focused a lot on skill trees and specializations and just making it look more like Destiny 2. I mean, the game is so unoriginal, you might just as well. But it's very clear that these 4 javelins would be the conduit to Anthem's gameplay, and therein lies another problem. These javelins don't really have a strong individual identity in the macrocosm of the game. The Colossus is the most unique one, but it's also strange how it's the only one designed to be massively different. The other 3 are honestly pretty interchangeable. Aside from their ultimates, the selection of abilities tends to be more of the same, something that deals damage in an AoE, a charged shot of energy, or a barrage of projectiles, etc. That's a lot of ways of doing the same thing, dealing damage, without really adding any complexity. Even their ultimates tend to be nothing more than you're now immune and you're gonna deal a lot of damage. What changes is how you target enemies with it. And that right there is the big problem, because I don't experience something all that different by choosing a certain javelin. It's the same playstyle, there's no deeper strategy to what you do. You don't have to or can prepare yourself for something specific or to have a certain role in a team because the game lacks that complexity. If you don't understand my frustration, let's take a look at Warframe. Warframe has a lot of mission types, and what you choose to bring in makes a lot of difference. Let's say you want to do a rescue mission. It's very beneficial to not be detected, so you can take Loki because of his invisibility, as well as a weapon that doesn't produce any noise, like a bow. Let's say you want to go through a defense mission. Frost is very strong as a defensive Warframe because of his snow globe, and this can go so much deeper than mission type, because what you want to do can also affect what you bring in. Let's say you want to farm resources. Necros is built specifically for that. His Desecrate ability makes enemies reroll their loot. And also, if you bring a weapon that slices enemies, each separate body half can also drop loot. You essentially get 3 times the resources based on what you bring. That sort of complexity is something Anthem never comes even close to. In fact, I don't think it ever wanted to because of how committed it is to its own mediocrity. I couldn't care less about what I bring if my weapons would deal consistently good damage. That's the thing, javelins feel like skins with passives held together by dreams of complexity that are left unfulfilled. Even those passive bonuses from gears are very rudimentary, while Warframe's modding system brings so much more to the table. The best I can think of that exemplifies the versatility of the system is Trinity. She is a support frame with 2 very important abilities, Energy Vampire and Blessing, but you cannot build for both at the same time because, for example, making the duration longer for one is not beneficial for the other. Either way, they are very much worth pursuing because one makes your team invincible for a long time, while the other ensures everyone has essentially infinite energy. This is just one example out of many, and the process of building anything for late game content is so much more involved. Once you reach max level, be it with a frame or a weapon, you can reset its level with an item that lets you change the polarity of a slot. And you should do that because each mod has a certain polarity, and putting it in the corresponding slot makes it use less capacity, which in turn lets you use even more mods. It's a system that ends up being very satisfying when you see what your Warframe and weapons can do, and you end up with a sense of attachment that makes the things you do just a little bit more special. Looking back at all of this, the memories I have with Warframe, the many things they added or revamped, it really puts into perspective just how fucked Anthem was from the start. In no way could Anthem ever hope to compete with Warframe, and I don't mean just in terms of content, but also in terms of knowing what their player base wants while garnering a lot of goodwill for their decisions. Anthem had none of that. Its content was hardly there, it didn't know what it wanted to be, much less what its prospective player base wanted, and had no goodwill left to spend. Remember, EA was voted as the worst company in America consecutively in 2012 and 2013. Now, let's return to the story because I kinda realized I left it at the tutorial. Anthem falls into a very common trap within the AAA live service environment in the sense that it dedicates a lot of resources into creating a high-fidelity story that ends up doing nothing for the game. I'm gonna make my opinion on the matter very clear. I don't think every live service game needs a deep focus in crafting a narrative experience. Look at Helldivers 2, for example. It doesn't have a story, at least not in the traditional sense. You have pieces of text that convey a wider narrative, but not a dedicated story mode. And this enables Helldivers 2 to focus on gameplay first. In contrast, you can take a look at Skutchel. It has the sort of story mode that clearly shows they put a lot of resources and development time in, but it doesn't pay off in terms of gameplay. And as a live service, interest is sustained by solid gameplay. I will let you guess which one of these two is thriving while the other one is currently fucking dying. Warframe was the same, by the way. They focused on gameplay first, with a few breadcrumbs that hint to a wider narrative. Okay, I promise this is the last time I talk about it, because it's really starting to feel like an invitation to play Warframe, which is something you should never not consider not doing. Anthem obviously dedicated resources to creating its narrative, but this, as we've just discussed, comes at a great expense of its gameplay. And the sad thing about all of this is that its story is terminally boring and otherwise quite poor. It's stuck in this weird limbo of just tossing you in its world, but also needing to force some exposition in to give it some direction, with writing that is just awful. Give this a listen.
The Dominion was led by Dr. Harkin, a man never seen before or after that day.
In all fairness, just about everyone fits in that category. Some guy called Ben, with whom I had a terrible interview experience, never seen him before, will never see him again. The guy who was eye-fucking me at the bus stop, never seen him before, might see him later? Not the best example. Anthem is littered with boring writing and weak setups. Its world is full of faux diegetic elements that imply depth where there is none. Take its enemies, for example. Who are these Dominion guys? Well, they are some dudes from the north and they are very powerful. Promise. Who are the Scars? Apparently a swarm of insects that mimic human behavior. Which is news to me. I never had a clear idea about what these guys are exactly, because the game never introduces them properly. Think about it, I platinumed the entire game only to find out after the fact from a wiki what they actually are. In the same vein, I also found out that the planet that this all happens on is called Coda. I get that some of you may say that these things are explained in the Codex or Cortex or whatever, but girl, this is a game. I'm not gonna do prior reading to learn the history and setting of a fictional world like I'm learning for an exam, and I'm willing to bet most players don't do that either. It's so easy to convey information like this in a way that is a lot more natural. Imagine a cutscene where the helmet of a Scar falls off and you see thousands of bugs scuttle away and someone off screen makes a joke about bees in a suit. It's as easy as that. And this is not to say that the writing is any better when it comes to introducing gameplay elements. Take for example the idea of a cipher. They are touted as this amazing companion with telepathic powers capable of processing vast amount of information, but otherwise in gameplay they are nothing more than a basic communicator. They just tell you what to do and where to go. They also support many Javelin functionalities, like showing where your projectiles will land in real time. But there are moments in the story where they're not connected to you and everything still works the same. There are also times when pilots operate without a cipher, or even when a cipher operates a Javelin without any assistance and everything is fine. The Dominion is another example, introduced as this unstoppable force in flashbacks and lore, but in gameplay actually quite stoppable, which makes it quite baffling as a character betrays you over them, pretending like they're unstoppable as if I don't constantly wipe my ass with them. Though, in all fairness, it's probably because he also just wanted to steal this Javelin that might be the only thing that can stop their plans. I don't like this character. But you see what I mean, right? There is this disparity between how things are written and how they are represented in gameplay, because, crucially, writing is not a substitute for actual design. Now, I also wanted to take some time to talk about the characters, but we are already quite a few minutes in, and let's be honest, things are not gonna start improving now. Suffice it to say, they are very bland, forgettable, and honestly, they sometimes get on my fucking nerves. Take Owen, for example. The best the writers can do for him is a trauma-dumping sesh, after which he incessantly wants to become a pilot. And he goes about this in the most infuriating way possible. He first steals a random javelin and gets himself in trouble, then keeps pestering someone else to take theirs, and then gets really passive-aggressive when someone with more experience takes over. He's essentially the grinder experience, though to Owen's credit, you don't get spammed by bots or get ads at every 2 taps. Low fucking bar, I know. And then, of course, we have the bit where he decides to screw you royally by betraying you. Something I really don't like this guy. I get that he's meant to be a character who is routinely frustrated with his position in the world, how he's left out and feels alone in his struggles. I empathize with that. But the way the narrative explores that, at every single step, is antithetical to whatever relatability I might have for him. He is so insufferable at every turn that his character crosses over a point where he becomes unbelievable. He's far beyond any semblance of relatability despite his shoehorned tragic background. Halleck is another great example of absurd character work. This guy holds a grudge against you because you forcibly saved him at the start, a situation where it's implied that everyone else either died or suffered grave injuries. He has the personality of a 10-year-old that is somehow also capable of having a midlife crisis. During the most sensible time of the story, he has a mental breakdown over progressively losing his piloting capabilities, gets himself in an insane amount of danger, and then turns it around to pretend that he did it all to motivate you. And this situation opens up some horrifically cringeworthy dialogue.
So, how's it going, kid? It's all good. Now you're learning.
Honestly, at this point I just want to turn into Bonnie Taylor and ask where are all the good men gone, cause if this is what I have to work with, we're fucked. This is all bad enough, but the game goes one extra step further that makes it so much more infuriating. You see, there are many NPCs with dialogue around Tarsus, and I mean many. This is where it becomes clear how Anthem has a chronic problem of focusing on things that don't matter. 90% of the conversations you have are with characters that don't matter, about things that don't matter, with player choices that are there for some reason, but don't matter. And after each and every single mission, the game reinforces just how much it invested into these interactions with the sheer amount of dialogues that open up. I get that the idea is to add more life to its world, but it just goes about it in the wrong way. Some of my personal highlights were woman who thinks is your mother, passive-aggressive lady, man who sells things, woman who sells things, man who cleans, and woman who delivers food. Except the last one is not true, but the fact that it fits in represents the problem. There was even a random character, and this was fascinating. A random character you have to rescue as a part of a side mission. She does nothing but conduct some blood analysis to advance a secondary plot, so by all means a very minor character, but after the mission is done, she now becomes a character you can regularly talk to. This is how strapped the game is for interesting characters. And you might say, well, yeah, they might be bad, but why complain when talking to them is optional? First off, just because you don't interact with something, it doesn't mean that effort and resources haven't gone into making these. And second, there are trophies for maxing out relationships with the game's 3 factions. Partaking in these dialogues gives faction allegiance. Now, are these factions set up well? No, they just exist and now you can get allegiance for them. It's tantamount to going to a McDonald's IRL and thinking you're closer to the employees because you bought something. The only thing I have appreciated about these dialogues is just how responsive the skip button is, and that shit says something, cause this game has a lot of UI issues. The menu is needlessly bloated and split in half, it doesn't close immediately when you exit it, there's There's an Alliance EXP component at the end of every expedition that does absolutely nothing, because I'm not in an alliance, so I show it. Sometimes you have to wait until characters finish their lines to start a mission, because the game won't tell you where to go, as if they have something important to share, like totes for real. And the map is very frequently buggy, and if you're at a point where you can't make a map work, I think you have bigger concerns than making a AAA game. Now, one of the last things I had to do to get the platinum is to tackle the game's collectibles. Yes, collectibles, the video game equivalent of cleaning your room by hiding everything into a drawer and pretending it's content. The sheer amount of collectibles Anthem has feels incorrect somehow. As far as my calculations go, which, you know, could be wrong, cause maths, ew, there are nearly 300 of them. But the way Anthem does it is a bit different. There are the sort of collectibles that are always there in a predetermined spot, but also some that are dynamic. Yes, Anthem innovates in the field of collectibles by making some that may or may not be there. Fortunately, there is an exploit that makes things easier. Fast traveling to a tomb will most likely respawn them unless the server changed where they can be found, at which point you have to hop on another server and try again. The static collectibles also have their own sort of exploit. You can actually create another pilot on your profile, which leads to all collectibles being available again, but the overall progress doesn't reset. And I just think that if you have to resort to exploits to make the process not be even more frustrating, we should probably take a step back and reevaluate the concept of a collectible. Someone somewhere lied about collectibles being fun, and I think we should find them. But let none of this distract you from how hard Anthem goes out of its way to waste not just your time, but precious development time on things that don't matter. None of this fuckery about dialogues and collectibles serves to make the gameplay better, and that's one of the many sources of mediocrity that makes Anthem irredeemably Anthem. By this point, I got the Platinum Trophy, and before leaving it, I did want to try and showcase some of its endgame content. Now sure, you could argue that the endgame is simply the game's hardest difficulty, but there are seasonal events like the Echoes of Reality that award you with a special currency used to buy endgame stuff. Although, I should say, Echoes of Reality seems to be the only such event added to the game before its development was cancelled. But trying to play it has been difficult because no one plays it, and most of the activities included require at least 2 players. A bit of a shame, I guess, but at this point I was happy to put Anthem behind me. So let's conclude. Anthem is a perfect example of the bad triquetra of game development. It was made under a publisher that regularly mismanages its studios and doesn't know what it wants other than the general concept of money. They wanted to copy another game while fundamentally not knowing what made said game good, and ultimately they couldn't stop focusing on all the wrong things. All of this resulted in a horrifically mediocre experience, an experience that I've admitted knew was bad but still wanted to play. And as I look back on what I was thinking, ultimately, I might just have wanted to experience being done with Anthem. In the end, to be brutally honest, I don't think there's much of value lost with the closure of Anthem. The only real loss is for those who have purchased it and gave a shit about it. And if you did, I really feel sorry for you. Anthem, more than anything, shows why the Stop Killing Games movement is so important. There's nothing here that justifies the absence of peer-to-peer functionality or an offline mode. EA could have definitely dedicated some time and effort to strip down the always online requirement and make Anthem available indefinitely, albeit with limited or no online functionality. But that would require spending some money on it, and they're not gonna do that. I guess EA and I have something in common, since it looks like they also wanted to be done with Anthem. And that's all for this video. Thanks for watching, especially all the way through, stuff like this really helps. I hope you'll like and subscribe to help a fruity little gamer in the algorithm, and as always, have a good one.